Oh, hell yes! Spider-Man suit videos are well and truly back on the menu, folks. There's always one of the most exciting parts of a Spider-Man movie hype cycle is getting those first set photos where you get a good, clear look at the costume. And this is a very, 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 very special costume indeed. Yes, so, first things first. I want to ask, what is with the recent trend of official suit reveals being way worse than the set photos? This was also true of the new Superman suit. The official reveal photo was not mega flattering. It didn't really communicate much of what this design was or the overall tone of it, but then when we got the first set photos, we got a much more clear indicator of how the suit was going to look in clear view, which is what it was in the majority of the movie. But then for the suit reveal for Spider-Man Brand New Day, we had those very close-ups of the shoulders and chest, but then when Tom Holland comes running out in the suit, there's no mask on him, so we don't get a look at the Spidey mask in the official reveal, and I feel like more publicity stuff needs to emphasize the masks in these superhero movies. The fact we didn't get a single official promo image of Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield in No Way Home with the masks on is unbelievable. But what was, I guess, in retrospect, kinda strange about that reveal video was how dark lit it was, how it appeared to be on quite a wide-angle lens, and Tom Holland was quite in the lower end of the frame of that shot, putting a little more emphasis on the more gappy webbing on the chest and the long spider legs. But I will say, the more I looked at that reveal video, the more I was liking the new suit. I've been wanting for a while for new MCU Spider-Man suits to feel just that bit more tangible. And like with this suit, we can see a bit more of where the fabric starts to bunch around the arms. It's not completely skin tight on him. There are visible seam lines, and you can see how the fabric curls as the blue fabric and the red fabric meet. They haven't tried to cover that up this time. Now, admittedly, a lot of that was done through CGI in the previous movies, and those practical costumes actually looked a whole lot better. So I may still be a tad disappointed when we actually do get to see the suit in action in the context of the film. Maybe they will paint over it with CGI again, but I've got a good feeling about this. And looking at it as it is now, please, I beg, do not paint over this in CGI. I love the fact that it's not completely skin tight on him. But I also love the fact that we've moved away from the overall shape language of the MCU Spider-Man suits as well, going for something a bit more sleek. We've no longer got the cut corners around the belt. The shape language is just a bit less boxy this time. And that's not me trying to retroactively slag off the old suits and say there was something inherently wrong with them or anything like that. No, that was just a part of their design language, and I just happen to prefer the way it's handled here. Right, look, just looking at these set photos, this is just a Spider-Man costume with no bells or whistles or gimmicks attached. This isn't a Spider-Man costume with the design sensibilities of the MCU, it's just comic booky Spidey. I love that the red and blue are richer this time. Previous MCU Spider-Man suits were very vibrant, but in certain lighting conditions could look a little bit pale. We have gone back to the colors being ever so slightly muted, but I genuinely think that's for the best. Looking at this though, the form of the red sections tells me that Tom Holland's Spider-Man really loved Andrew Garfield's costume. There's a lot more Andrew Garfield Spider-Man here than there is Tobey Maguire in terms of him drawing inspiration from those other Spideys. The way the red stripes on the arms thin, the way the gloves are not just a rigid shape but are instead a bit more diagonal. Also the fact that the belt doesn't point downwards and is instead more just a stripe. Again, very Andrew Garfield. But with the angles at which these photos are taken and the overall lighting, I gotta say, the webbing and the legs on the spider being a little longer look 10 times better now. That slightly low, wide angle really kind of made Spider-Man look very thin, but also really put a lot of emphasis on the gaps in the webbing in terms of like where his lower chest was. That really isn't an issue in the set photos in the slightest. In fact, I actually really love the way the longer lower legs on the spider look now. And the fact that the spider is kind of a mix between the Tom Holland, Andrew Garfield, and Tobey Maguire spider designs is cool. The central piece looks less like a butt plug this time as well than it did in the No Way Home final swing. Now, I will admit, I can see why some people might be a bit disappointed by this final Spidey design. I know that there are folks out there who just wanted a Spider-Man costume that doesn't have any raised webbing, doesn't have the brick patterns, and is in like a vibrant red and blue, and that's what they got at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. And now we've gone back to the muted colors, the brick patterns, and the raised webs again. So I really want to say, like, if there are people out there on social media that are a bit disappointed by that, please don't gaslight them into thinking that they're invalid for that. I think that's perfectly valid. If you wanted something completely back to basics, well, we've kind of moved more back in the direction of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. For me, I'm okay with this. I was honestly a little concerned about how shiny and bright those blue sections were on the No Way Home final swingsuit. I was worried that they could look a bit green under certain lighting. I wonder how Ryan Meenerding feels. I wonder how, like, the costume designer Ryan Meenerding feels about these departures from that final swingsuit design, though, given how much thought clearly went into that final swingsuit. Only for them to instead kind of move things back in the direction of Amazing Spider-Man 2. Maybe it was his decision, I don't know. And with the previous incarnation of the suit, there was some debate as to whether or not the spider on the chest was gold, as a little reference to previous MCU Spider-Man suits. If I may weigh in my 2 cents, we will never truly know unless we ask Ryan Meenerding himself. We don't have a practical version of that prop. But from where I'm sat, I think it was an incredibly subtle gold. If we assume that, like, his eyes and the spider would probably realistically be made of the same overall plastic, there's no reason why the spider on the chest would react to different lighting, and in these renders the lighting is clearly supposed to be neutral. So if the spider is showing kind of like a gold highlight to it, I think that was there. Even when the suit was brought to Spider-Man 2 on the PS5 as well, you could still see a slight gold highlight to it. Given how subtle it was and how it only showed up under certain lighting conditions, I really didn't mind. But having it back in black here just feels right. And also the spider is flat now too. We've also got a look at his web shooters now too, and these look to be just kind of clip-on web shooters. Far chunkier than the little refined ones that he had on the previous incarnation of this suit. Now I won't lie, I would have actually been fine with them actually having the straps be visible around the wrists. I've never felt that, you know, has any negative impact on the design if you have those there, but this still works fine too. I think they're a little long, and I think they're a little chunky. And without the straps there, that maybe throws things ever so slightly off balance. Yeah, I just think if you're going to make the web shooters bigger and more prominent, I think it makes sense to have the strap around the wrist as well. The back spider is unchanged. It is the same one from the final swingsuit, so if you were, like me, hoping for it to be the round one from Spider-Man Homecoming again, well, no, we're not moving back in that direction, it seems. Which is a little strange, considering how hard they've gone in making this a comic booky Spider-Man. You'd think they'd maybe want to give him that comic booky back spider, and the fact that it only lasted for one suit is kind of crazy to me. But no, the back spider does match the front spider, and it's not a bad design. I'm not really complaining much. It's just... obviously, I guess I was a little excited for the idea that maybe the Homecoming back spider could return, because I do love that overall shape. It wouldn't have worked on the red and black suits with the white accents. That wouldn't have worked. So I can see why they didn't do it there, but I feel like they could have done it here. This would have maybe even been the perfect opportunity to do that. But now we got to talk about the mask. And, I love this mask. So the overall layout of the webs is unchanged from the previous MCU Spider-Man costumes on the mask. The webs are still nice and spaced out, it's still got that nice little circle in the middle. It's exactly the same in terms of overall layout. Obviously the fabric being Amazing Spider-Man 2 style fabric and the raised webbing is going to make it different from previous MCU Spidey masks. But maybe the biggest, yet also most subtle departure here is the eyes, because they are still going for those John Romita Sr. / Steve Ditko eyes. Which is great, that's like one of my favorite eye designs for Spider-Man. They haven't gone for gunmetal eyes like I proposed in the previous video, which would have been a nice way of factoring in Tobey's design a little bit here. Which aside from the spider on the chest, I'm not really seeing any of. Again, can only assume that Tom Holland's Spider-Man really liked Andrew Garfield's costume. But the eyes are bigger and a little less rounded, which I think was a great call. It, if anything, makes him look even more comic booky, and it's like, yeah, if we actually look at these images, this really does look like an Alex Ross Spider-Man painting come to life. Maybe not the best wording, as Alex Ross's paintings are already alive, but the more a comic book movie resembles an Alex Ross painting, the better. If anything, I would say this suit most closely resembles the Spider-Man in the Spider-Man 2 opening credits in the Alex Ross artwork. Maybe that's where the Tobey Maguire influence on this suit is. So okay, overall bottom line with this suit is, it is beautiful. This is a thing of beauty. That's Spider-Man. No ifs, ands, or buts, no bells or whistles, no gimmicks. That is Spider-Man. I think there is validity in the perspective of someone that would have preferred if they just stayed with the previous incarnation of the final swingsuit. I think that is completely fair. And, you know, I also think it's completely fair if maybe someone wanted them to stick more with the MCU design sensibilities as well. There's a lot of different perspectives out there. There's a lot of different preferences. Takes a lot to make a world. Some people prefer steak, some people prefer pie. And it would be moronic to get into fights over that. But as far as I'm concerned, this costume is more or less perfect. It's just classic Spidey, and I can't argue with that. I've often said that my favorite of the MCU Spider-Man suits is the upgraded suit from the beginning of Spider-Man No Way Home. I thought that was a really cool update and redesign to the costume. But it is worth noting that Spidey's classic suit is one of the most enduring designs in history. In the end, the classic will always prevail in pop culture. Which is why all these, hey guys, I made a Spider-Man suit, I put a load of white on it, are going to be flavor of the decade. And we will always come back to something like this by the end of it. And every time we do, there will be celebrations. I am all for doing new things with the Spider-Man suits. Doing new things with the world that the Spider-Man stories take place in and having suits that reflect that. But A, ultimately, it's always going to come back to this, and B, we gotta find more creative ways of doing that than cutting up the red sections and putting white on it. Now, in terms of my all-time favorite Spider-Man suit, it's always probably going to be the Raimi suit, because I'm nostalgic and I'm biased, and that costume just means a lot to me. But is it necessarily the best of the film suits? Not necessarily. It doesn't look very practical, it's not believably homemade, which is what it's presented to be in the films. I know the novelization moves a different direction with that, which is kind of cool too. This suit here, in the real world, is still not going to be believably homemade. People are not 3D printing their own urethane webs at home. But the way it fits him, the seam lines, the way the fabric moves, it makes the suit a character in itself. It adds an air of tangibility to it. Which is why I'm begging, Marvel, leave this one alone. Please do not paint over it. Please don't have him change out of this costume every movie going forward. This should just be the central Spider-Man suit. Obviously, you know, for certain situations, like if you want to do a black suit storyline, have him wear the black suit, but always have him come back to this. We don't need him changing into no stealth suit for stealth missions or anything like that. Just stick with this. Let the era of Spider-Man having like 10 different costumes over the course of 3 movies just be kept to the home trilogy. Let that be one of the things that characterizes the home trilogy. And moving forward, please stick with this. Alright, that's great. Okay, right. All of you go. We're done.